What is going on with the museum system in Rise of Kingdoms? Because the uncomfortable truth is that these relics are not doing what they were designed to do when the museum system was first added to the game all the way back in 2022, which was like that was 4 years ago. Does that mean the museum system has been in Rise of Kingdoms for more than 50% of its life? Relics have been in the game longer than they haven't been in the game. I've been playing this game for so long, man. Oh my god. So we need to talk about the museum because there are some key commanders that are on the horizon that are right around the corner that could definitely land with a splash. But are they the commanders that we are expecting? For example, Chiskel recently posted a video where he posed a bunch of questions that he wanted to ask the developers, and in that video he did give me a shout out, so thank you, Chiskel, I appreciate that. But he also mentioned relics for Scipio and Joan, and I am excited for those relics, but are they farther away than we think? Today let's go ahead and take an honest look at the museum system, what it was supposed to do, what it is currently doing, and what its short-term and long-term future look like in Rise of Kingdoms in 2026. But before we jump in, of course, what's going on, guys? Cheers. Now, as you guys know, I am a sponsored partnered creator with Rise of Kingdoms, so if you want more Rise of Kingdoms content, consider subscribing down below. A lot of you guys probably think you're sub, but you're actually not. Double check and leave a like while you're down there. All right, let's jump right in here. We got a lot to talk about. Okay, I think the place we should start is, what are the most recent commanders to land in the museum? Okay, the answer is Trajan, who got 10% march speed, 5% damage taken reduction, and we also got Moctezuma over here, okay, which literally nobody has. He got some defense and march speed. It's whatever, okay, no one cares. I believe these two landed in the museum in February. Right now this is March 3rd, and then before that we got Nebu and Cyrus. Okay, and the last time that I made a video talking about the museum system was all the way back in August of 2025 when we talked about the introduction of Zenobia and Harold. Okay, so from August until now, that is 6 months, right? Because September, October, November, December, January, February, 6 months have gone by, and we've only gotten 2 sets of commanders, right? We got Nebu Cyrus and we got Trajan Moctezuma. Mary and Archimedes don't count because they were added into the game at that time, and these are season 2 commanders, so they're kind of just forced to have relics almost. We'll talk about Chuck and Bertrand in a minute. Okay, I know when those guys are getting relics, but over the course of 6 months we got 2 commander releases, so that means every 3 months on average we're getting new commanders added to the museum system, and that is a very slow pace to be adding new commanders. And the reason that I bring this up is because I was there when they added the museum system. In fact, I've been here since the very beginning. I've seen it all, folks, and I remember the mail that they sent when they added the museum into the game. In fact, we've got it right here. Pull up the receipts, ladies and gentlemen. This is what they said specifically about the museum. Look, new city building, the museum. After Season of Conquest, governors can build a new structure in their cities, the museum. The museum has 14 exhibits, each belonging to a legendary commander, and they can unlock exhibits using exhibit coins and buy relics with relic coins. The first batch is Cao Cao, Minamoto, Ethelfled Barca, Richard, Charles Martel, El Cid, Isongye, Mulan, Ragnar, Mehmed, Frederick, Caesar, and Charlemagne. But this bottom part, this is the part that matters the most. During Season of Conquest, governors from different kingdoms will own different commanders, resulting in an imbalance of commander power among governors. We have introduced the new museum system to help governors to strengthen certain commanders, allowing them to better face the challenges of Season of Conquest. Okay, so what do they directly announce here in this mail? They said, hey, some governors have really strong commanders and other governors have relatively weak commanders in comparison. And what they're talking about here is that Season of Conquest commanders themselves are stronger than all of these commanders that they listed that were getting a museum relic. And so the point here is to strengthen governors who only have access to those gold key commanders, so that way they can better face the governors that are already in Season of Conquest. The point of the museum system was effectively to sort of, just a little bit, bridge the gap between new players and old players, right? If the new players are forced to use the gold key commanders in Season of Conquest, well, at least they'll have a little bit more stats to bring them closer in line with what the current meta was at that time, which was like, back then we're talking like Guan Yu and stuff, right? Okay, so even now we are way beyond that meta. Even Guan Yu is no longer part of the meta, so needless to say, the current level of commander power in Season of Conquest is way higher than it was even back then. So now that we know what the original purpose of the museum was when introduced to Rise of Kingdoms, we have to ask ourselves, are these museum relics actually achieving that goal? Because the museum has undergone plenty of changes over the years. In fact, now we've got tier 2 and in some cases tier 3 relic upgrades for some of these older commanders, and like, sure, some of these commanders do see a bit of an increase in their usage as a result of the museum. For example, Yi Seong-Gye, Charles Martel, right? Like, I mean, straight up, Yi Seong-Gye is very good in Rise of Kingdoms right now with Emperor Qin, although next month I'm anticipating new archer legendaries, and maybe that will be the last time that we see Yi Seong-Gye in the meta. That's all speculation, however, but we also see a lot of inconsistency here. For example, some of these gold key commanders, or I should say season 1 commanders, only have 2 tiers of upgrades. In the case of Cao Cao, in the case of Minamoto, in the case of Ethelfled, why did those commanders not have a tier 3 upgrade when these other commanders like Yi Seong-Gye and Charles Martel got their tier 3 upgrade a very long time ago, right? So a little bit of inconsistency there, but now we see a lot of season 2 and even season 3 and beyond commanders landing in the museum. And this is where I think we start to get even more divorced from reality, right? Because when we think about, okay, well, what commanders are new players going to have going into Season of Conquest? Well, it's not Nebu, right? It's not Moctezuma or Trajan. It's certainly not Harold or Zenobia or Chandragupta or YSS or Artemisia or Ramses. In fact, new players probably don't have any of those commanders, because if they spend any amount of time at all looking at any content online, they would know that none of those commanders are even remotely close to the open field PvP meta, and none of them find themselves in the rally garrison meta either. So we are currently in a reality where the museum is adding relics for commanders that only old players have, which doesn't make any sense at all when we think about what they initially said the goal was for the museum. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm all for buffs to old commanders. I think that's fantastic, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But when we look at the fact that we're only getting new commanders here every 3 months, the current pace of museum relic distribution or release is just a bit too slow, because by the time we get a museum relic for a commander that could possibly, potentially, maybe come back to the meta, it's already too late. So in the case of Nebu, if we got a museum relic for Nebu a year ago before we saw the introduction of Emperor Qin, then okay, maybe this actually would have moved the needle for the archer meta, right? But now that the relic just came out a couple of months ago, it doesn't really do anything, and so nobody's going to get it. And likewise, if a museum relic for CPO Prime or Joan Prime landed in Rise of Kingdoms today, like Chiskel mentioned in his video we could be seeing, that would be great, because those commanders are just now exiting the meta, and so a museum relic might pull them back a little bit and just bump them up and make them come back a little, especially if, like, for example, CPO got like 10% march speed, right? And like maybe 200 damage factor to his active skill. Okay, well, now we're cooking. Now Ragnar CPO is a bit faster in the field. Now CPO's active skill hits a little bit harder. Okay, now that's meta again, right? But here's the problem. We're actually really far away from seeing CPO and Joan in the museum. And I know it doesn't feel like we would be that far away, right? Because we just got Trajan after all. But here's where things get a little bit uncomfortable, right? Because we see that they just added Moctezuma and Trajan. So that means that the next release, which will probably be in May or something like that, if they continue on with the 3-month cycle, then okay, in May we're gonna get Zhang Yu and Jadwiga, and then in August we're gonna get Chuk and Pakal, and then in November we're gonna get Gilgamesh and Manatore, and then in February of 2027 we'll get Suleiman and Honda. May of 2027 we'll get Nevsky along with Bertrand, by the way, and then sometime in August of 2027 is when we will see CPO Prime, right? And then after that is Boudica Prime, then it's Joan of Arc Prime. Okay, so basically by mid to late 2027 we should see CPO Prime and Joan Prime land in the museum if they continue on with this absurdly slow release pace of these museum relics, right? And like, look, in the past, I feel like, and you guys can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I feel like they released museum relics faster than every 3 months, right? I feel like they were releasing them about as fast as new commanders, which is like every 70 days, right? At least on average. So we used to see museum relics land in the game a lot faster, but even if it's every 70 days, we are still very far away from getting CPO and Joan of Arc Prime in the museum, right? And again, Nevsky is going to come even before that, and that might actually move the needle a little bit as well. But no matter how you cut it, the relic release for Scipio and Joan is very far away, and we know that the cosmetics for those commanders are coming very soon. Right now, look, nothing is set in stone here, and the developers can decide that they're just going to drop museum relics as they see fit. They're just going to stop releasing them in order, and they're just going to start releasing whatever relic they want at whatever time. Or maybe they'll make special exceptions for Scipio Joan because they are getting a new cosmetic in the game. Who knows, right? But there's two other key things that people are forgetting about the museum relic system here. Okay, the first is that we almost never see a tier 1 relic actually move the needle for any commander, right? I mean, we can go through here and look, and like these relics don't move the needle almost at all. And that's not to say that people don't get them and they don't use them, right? For example, Attila, like of course if you're going to run Attila, you're going to want 5% defense and 3% skill damage taken reduction, right? Like obviously that's just purely upside. There's no downside to getting that. If you're going to run a rally or garrison or even open field, you might as well get this. I mean, that is like, I don't know, a purple armaments amount of stats, right? Or maybe a little bit less, but even still, like it's all upside, and this currency is sitting here doing nothing, so you might as well get it, right? But if we're talking about a buff that actually changes the meta, right? It changes the open field meta or the rally garrison meta. I don't think any of these commanders have accomplished that with just their tier 1 upgrade, right? I mean, maybe William, but you know, you could argue that William was already being used behind King Arthur before the relic came into the game, right? So it's like, okay. And when you think back to Yi Seong-Ye, like that first tier relic is like, it's not nothing, right? The archer defense is fantastic because he's a glass cannon, but like he really got the upgrade around tier 2 to tier 3, right? That's when it really seemed to like be pretty obvious that like this is some good stuff here, you know what I mean? Same thing with Charles Martel, right? Like this is a great tier 1 relic, but the tier 2 and tier 3 are really where things started to pop off, and people were like, okay, that's just so many stats that you can't ignore it. Like it's just insane. So even in a world where they make an exception and they do add a relic for Scipio and Joan out of order, and they add it sooner rather than later, it'll still be a tier 1 upgrade, right? So like it's still going to be something small like 3% skill damage, or some of these commanders, like I mean Nebu's 15% attack, 10% normal damage taken reduction. That would be pretty good for a commander like Joan or a commander like Scipio, right? So I mean some of these would matter, you know, but it's still relatively small. Okay, if we, I mean, especially if you look at things like Ramses, right? Like what is that, you know? Leonidas, what is that? It's crazy. So not only is the release timing very slow, but also what they do release is not typically enough. And then on top of that, the most uncomfortable part about all of this, and perhaps this is the most important point out of all of this, right, is that as the meta changes and we go down more and more smite damage for infantry, more and more combo damage for cavalry, more and more skill damage for archers, it almost doesn't even matter because the synergy of these older commanders is simply not going to be there, right? So in a world where Scipio does get a modestly good relic, right? Like let's say it's the same as Nebu's, okay, this is a solid relic. Well, okay, you're still dealing skill damage. So like, who are you going to bench for that, right? Are you going to bench the William Wallace and say like, okay, well, it's just way more stats and it's AoE and, you know, all that stuff, but okay, well, he's not dealing the proper type of damage. You know, there's a lack of synergy there. Even if he's a secondary, it doesn't make any sense, right? So like, even if they gave all of these commanders a reasonable amount of stats, it's still not going to have synergy with the latest and greatest stuff, right? So this brings me back to my original question at the beginning of the video. What is going on with the museum system in 2026? And this is why a few months ago, I kind of said that like, I almost wish the developers would go back and just kind of scrap the whole system or refund everybody the coins and try it again. Like I feel like that would be the way to do it because the game is just so different than 2022, you know what I mean? And like, look, let's play a little bit of devil's advocate here, okay? If they actually made these museum relics powerful, let's say these relics actually moved the needle, then it's a little bit unfair for the older players, right? I mean, people like me who have Nebu in a state that is usable, people like me who have maxed out Herald, right? Like I have a lot of these commanders that are just sitting on the bench doing nothing, but I can activate them whenever I want, right? If they suddenly got a super good buff, then boom, I'm already there. I don't have to make a new investment. I don't have to spend anything. I don't have to do anything. I just get that benefit, right? I'd have to get the relic, of course, but I mean, like I've got this currency just chilling, right? So like, okay, if that's the case, then suddenly the museum now becomes an unfair advantage to older players, which is the actual opposite of what they wanted to do, right? I read you the mail earlier. They wanted to bridge that gap, okay? So if these relics became too powerful, well, now we swing the the pendulum too far in the other direction. All right, and again, I'm playing devil's advocate here, so that way maybe we can understand like what the developers are thinking. And then on top of that, right, let's say they did give Nebu an insane relic. All right, let's say they bumped up his active skill damage factor by 1,000 and they gave him like 40% archer health or something like that, or like, you know, 40% health, 20% march speed. You know what I mean? Like, let's say it was truly insane to the point where it actually changed the open field meta, right? And I'm not going to argue the specifics, you know, if 40% health wouldn't actually make him meta. That's not the point. Okay, let's just, whatever you think meta is, okay, let's assume his relic was so good that now he's part of the open field meta. All right, to a certain extent, I'm sure there would be players upset about that who went in and, you know, let's say they maxed a commander to use that now takes the bench. So in this case, let's use Ashurbanipal, for example, right? Let's say somebody went in and actually maxed Ashurbanipal specifically for open field use, which was never a good idea. Okay, he's a literal rally commander and only the highest tier archer player should have been running 3 archers anyway, which means you might already be a rally leader. That's besides the point. Okay, I digress. Let's say you did make that investment in Ashurbanipal and you spent all those sculptures, and then now we've got Nebu comes out with a relic and now he's actually better than Ashurbanipal. Well, now you wasted your sculptures on this newer commander with the sort of promise that he would be better, right? Because his kit is better, and so you made the investment and then now it's worse, right? Now Nebu's got a new relic and he's now better and you wasted your sculpture. So again, from a developer perspective, I can understand not wanting to upset players who make an investment in the latest and greatest things with confidence, knowing that that is their best choice. I can understand that as well. It's a balancing act at the end of the day. They have to balance, you know, how strong should they make these old commanders versus how strong the new commanders are, and it's probably a tough decision to make. But one thing is certain, and that is the fact that the museum system is almost negligible in 2026. Like, there really is not a reason to get anything here other than YSG, and then if you do barbs and stuff, then maybe grab Minamoto or something like that. Like, besides that, there's really not much to get here. I guess Alexander the Great if you're still going to do the instant proc meta. Okay, but you'll notice a lot of what I have here, like, unfortunately I got Martel, I didn't really need this, but a lot of what I have here is for Canyon, okay, or it's for like doing barbs or just old investments that I just didn't need to do, right? Like mistakes that I made along the way with museum system. But like, frankly, was it a mistake if I don't actually need the currency for anything, right? Like, I'm just goofing around because who cares? This currency is basically worthless, which makes no sense because they've got a literal bundle in the game that sells you this currency as a source of revenue for Rise of Kingdoms. You would think that it would be relevant at least a little bit, but it feels like it's not. All of that to say, I would love to see commanders get museum relics faster than they've been getting them over the last couple of months, and I'd like to see the tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 upgrades of these commanders be relevant and bring some old commanders back to the meta, right? I know what I just said about like the opportunity cost with Ashurbanipal and pissing off some players, but at the end of the day, I recently saw a comment from somebody on my channel, and I apologize, I don't remember the name, but they said something along the lines of the fact that they wish that the open field meta was a bit more diverse. And this is a thought that I've had for years, and you know, it's kind of the thing with making content, you're constantly looking at the meta, and a lot of these videos, right, like whether you watch me or Chiskel or whoever else, a lot of these videos do sound very similar. You know, we talk about, okay, well, these are the best open field pairs right now, and you see a lot of the same names and a lot of the same pairs, and like these videos probably overlap like 90%, right? Now, we do have different experiences in the game. Chiskel's fighting in like the top Imperium kingdoms and I'm in 1568, right? And so like we are like a mid to low A tier at this point. Maybe we're, I don't know, I actually don't even know where we're at right now. I haven't looked lately, but my point is like these are very different experiences. And so for me, I could say, oh well, you know, this has worked really well. Like for example with William Wallace, right? I have seen really no reason for me to get William Wallace until Sun Tzu Prime came into the game, right? But for somebody like Chiskel and maybe some other high-end players, they found that William Wallace really worked well for them. And so there is a little bit of like discussion to be had there about the reasonable meta, but at the end of the day, like we're splitting hairs almost, right? Like again, 90% of the best open field pairs in all these videos are pretty much the same things, right? And I think, you know, to that commenter's point, if there were ways that these older commanders could actually come back to the meta, well, that would make things a bit more diverse, right? It would make things more interesting. You could actually come up with new pairs and you can come up with new ways to run things, and you could actually have differing opinions on what the best open field marches are, because some accounts are built this way and other accounts are built that way. And like this problem is not unique to Rise of Kingdoms, right? Even if you look at another game in a totally different genre, that being Yu-Gi-Oh, right? Not only is that a different genre, that's literally a physical card game, but the meta for that game changes changes regularly, but usually the best decks are all kind of the same, right? You go to tournaments and like the top 5 decks or archetypes are usually the same throughout that format, and then there's a ban list that comes out, and then they release new cards, and then there's power creep, and like that's how it goes, right? So again, this is not a problem exclusive to Rise of Kingdoms. Most games that have power creep have this problem, but at the end of the day, I do still think that there's a little bit of wiggle room here to swing the pendulum back towards older commanders a little bit, to add a little bit more diversity, right? Not only will it, give older players a reason to dust off their herald or something like that, but also it would help returning players who come back to the game. They don't feel so outclassed anymore because, oh well, I can still use my Leonidas or whatever because they gave him a really good relic. They didn't, right? They didn't actually, but I'm saying hypothetically, if they gave him, the tier 3, let's say it was 20% march speed and like 30% normal damage taken reduction, would that be enough? Probably not. But my point is, like, if these relics mattered, it would help returning players. It would be a nice bump to older players, especially free-to-play players, and it would add more diversity to the open field meta, which I think just makes things a little bit more interesting, right? I mean, don't you? Wouldn't it be cool if there was a specific way that you could run like Mehmed II in the open field and have it actually be your best performing march, right? I'm not talking about acceptable, I'm not talking about good. I'm saying, like, what if there was a way to optimize for Mehmed to make him your best performing march on the field? That would be cool, right? I think that would be cool. I don't know, well, you guys can let me know, but all of that to say, I think there's a lot of benefits to the museum system getting a rework, or to them, releasing commander relics a bit faster, or maybe even just release them out of order, to bring things up to par, to give more diversity to the open field meta, and to help out older free-to-play players and people that may have invested in these commanders a long time ago. And also, by the way, if new players, right now, let's just say new players have no reason, they have absolutely no reason in the world to get their hands on Herald, right? I'm using Herald because back in the day, he used to be part of the field meta for infantry. He hasn't been in a long time, but new players have no reason to get him, okay? They will never spin the wheel of fortune for him. They will never buy the daily special value for him. They will never ever get this commander because there's no reason, right? Unless they just want the Writer of History bundle pop. But my point is, if his relic was good, well, all of a sudden now we've got people spending money for this commander. We've got people buying bundles to spin the wheel for this commander, right? So like, even from a business perspective, it would make sense to make some of these older commanders a little bit more relevant, in my opinion. But you guys can let me know in the comment section below what you think about the museum relic system. Do you think this needs a rework and fine tuning, or do you actually not even care about this at all? Do you think that this system should just be thrown in the garbage? Do you like the way that the current power creep system is very predictable and very understood, right? You don't have to worry about getting older commanders. Do you like that? Some people like that. They like the safety of that. It's predictable, right? And that's a valid opinion to have. So I'm curious what you guys think in the comment section below. And while you're down there, consider dropping a thumbs up on the video if you made it all the way to the very end. It really helps out the channel a ton. And subscribe while you're down there and click the bell to be notified the next time that we upload a Rise of Kingdoms video. With that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been Omniarch. I'll talk to you guys again soon. Peace.